Hi there. It's been a while, hasn't it? Sorry for the wait. I've had a bit of a rocky schedule, as you can see. But now that I'm here, and now that you're watching, things are looking pretty cool, right? We're gonna be talking about water. Water. I drink it, you drink it. Hopefully, if you don't, then that's kind of bad for you. You should drink more water. It's something that's just necessary in life. Just like video games. So, what do you do when you put 2 and 2 together? Well, you learn that 2 rights sometimes make a wrong. While making water in 2D games was relatively simple, in 3D games it had more of a feeling to it. It's actually an interesting tunnel to explore, so sit down, buckle up, take a sip from your trusty Vault 13 canteen and enjoy. See, unlike snow and rocks, water is shockingly not solid. It's a liquid, and liquids in games are just slightly more complicated to get right. While solids are rigid and predictable, liquids are not. However, none of this actually mattered in the 70s because everyone would just stare at a black screen while they're playing. The first ever water-based game was 1977's Depth Charge. Depth Charge is quite the strategic arcade game where you have to place bombs at the right time in order to hit the submarines below. However, the actual water part is just complete nothingness. Though I guess that was pretty much the standard with all arcade games at the time because those games were on a CRT screen. If you think about it, arcade machines would be constantly running to show you their latest and greatest games, but with a CRT screen, that is a cathode ray tube, there is a tendency for the screen to actually have elements burned into it. So the more black a screen is, the more time it will take for that screen to burn in. It was probably best hardware-wise for the majority of the game to be left black. And honestly, the deeper you go in the ocean, the darker it gets, so Depth Charge is actually accurate to real life. 1980s Polaris for the Atari 2600, wow, that is a lot of numbers, is basically the same as Depth Charge, but now you're getting revenge. This is also the first game where water is, well, water. And from here till the late 90s, water has pretty much stayed the same, only looking more nicer and nicer as technology gets better and we get from 1-bit to 64-bit. However, before we move on to the next chapter of water, I would like to mention some noteworthy things about water in 2D games. If you watched my snow video, then I talked about how certain things are used more for an aesthetic or thematic purpose rather than a mechanical one, and that was very prominent at the time where there were hardware limitations, mainly due to hardware limitations, but as time progressed, we could do more stuff. And that goes true for water. Going back to Super Mario Bros. While Mario isn't the first one to revolutionize water levels, it is definitely something that sticks because up until this point all you knew was running and jumping. And now you need to swim? Aha, but are you actually swimming? Because while it may look like he's swimming from the blue backdrop to the coral sprites to his own swimming animation, he's not actually swimming, is he? All you're essentially doing is jumping infinitely, but all these things together give you the illusion of being underwater. And not only that, you're also a lot slower in water because, well, in reality, you're just slower in water than on land. That's just how human beings are. And hedgehogs, don't forget about hedgehogs. But what if you were something else entirely? And no, I'm not talking about a hedgehog, but a dolphin. To be fair, Echo is pretty much a what if Sonic could swim type game. You play as a dolphin named Echo and you're always submerged in water, but the fact that you're playing as a character who is native to their habitat, instead of a dinky old human being like you and me, you're fast, super fast. If the game was about a human going underwater, then naturally we would want that person to have human-like qualities, and as a result, the whole tone of the game will shift from a more fast-paced one to a more slower-paced one, where you're more vulnerable. I'll get to that in a sec, don't you worry. I also can't move on without mentioning how stunning the game looks for a game that was released in 1992, especially when you compare it to these lamos. While the 90s was a brilliant time for water in 2D games, 3D games started popping off hard at this point, and well, over there, we were essentially back to square one. Early 3D games were essentially tasked with figuring out how stuff works, but now with the problem of an extra dimension. And because this was a huge jump, it basically meant that water would range from decent looking to your mum, working with rigid structures that behaved predictably, was a cakewalk compared to the ever-changing properties water provides. For one, water is constantly flowing and moving, so the original method simply won't work. So to work around this, we started using shaders. Now, shaders are mainly used for sprucing up your look in Minecraft, but it also is mainly used for rendering light. And I would explain it more, but in fact, I'm just gonna shill 50 likes in this video and I'll make a light in video games. But the tool is used to create these lighting effects can also be applied to the water, and that's how we get the moving, flowing water in games. The problem is that it takes a lot more than that to make water look like water. Well, water is primarily backed by shaders. Depending on the type of style you're making for your game, you're going to need to mix a whole different type of techniques for it to look well. I would explain these techniques, but I'm not a developer, so I know nothing about them. Early 3D games means early 3D tech, so you rarely saw any of this new fancy stuff in use. So at the time, it really boiled down to two options. Either create a flat blue plane and just add some trickery to give you the illusion of being underwater, or die. If you went with the first option, then you could actually come up with some interesting ideas with water. Like with a book, movie, any piece of media really, anything you see in a game has a reason to why it's there, excluding the obvious reason of it mimicking reality because that's kind of boring. There's a multitude of ways you can use water. Take Ocarina of Time's water temple for example. Aside from the usual swimming and being slow in water mechanic that we all know, water in this particular dungeon that everyone hates has a secondary feature because not only is it a boundary, but it later becomes an obstacle between you and exploring the dungeon. So to get around the dungeon, you would need to control the water level yourself, essentially making the entire dungeon a navigational puzzle you have to solve. And of course, we can't talk about water without mentioning Super Mario Sunshine. Now, I personally haven't played the game myself, but I do know that Nintendo is very infamous for utilizing one mechanic to its most. And that one mechanic in Sunshine is Flood. Much like Cappy in Super Mario Odyssey, Flood is engraved into Mario's moveset. Sure, you can simply shoot water out the nozzle, but you can also fly, launch yourself, give yourself a boost, and also cleaning up your goddamn ass. Between the 90s and the early 2000s, a lot of games rarely had deep water mechanics. In fact, the most common way to use water was as a boundary. It took GTA 5 games, not GTA 5, but GTA 5 games to let you swim in water, and even then, they didn't really do much with it. GTA 5, the game now, not the whole game series. Shit. GTA 5 actually lets you swim underwater, but even then there's not much to do other than contemplate why you bought this game 3 times on 3 different generations of consoles and question whether this is actually Skyrim in disguise. Speaking of rehashing the same thing over and over again, subscribe to my Patreon! Please. Even to this day, most games that include water have barely scratched the surface. Literally. And I get why. Water just isn't fun. Mainstream games, that is AAA titles, are hell bent on graphics and realism, and as a result you'll find that they will not do much with water. But that doesn't always have to be the case. A fun game design philosophy is that the more you restrict yourself, the more creative your ideas will become. Let's say you make a game and you base it all around water. What can you do with that? Honestly, you can probably come up with a lot. Now, as it stands, water is either a boundary or an obstacle. But in the games I'm about to mention right now, that obstacle is overcomable in many different ways. In Subnautica, see I told you I'd get to that, you start off as a lone, vulnerable human, stranded on an ocean planet, knowing nothing about whatever it is you're in. But over time, you learn more and you build things to help you explore and protect yourself from the scary monsters. I think Subnautica sets itself apart to other survival games mainly because the entire game encapsulates the feeling of your first night in Minecraft. Pure horror. Everything is unknown, you are entirely vulnerable, you don't know what to do, except that expands throughout the whole game, making what is essentially a normal survival game into a survival horror. Going the complete opposite route, we have Abzu, which is a relative... Why am I hating everything? Going the complete opposite route, we also have Abzu, which, aside from the misunderstood creature, is a very peaceful game where you can swim with turtles. It's extremely lovely to play because while you are a somewhat low poly human, your movements are very fluid and fast, and it makes for a more cathartic experience.
And you can swim with turtles, don't forget about that.
So yeah, water can definitely be an interesting thing to discover and explore. All you really need to do is see. Sure, your movements are slower in Sea of Thieves, but that's really the only thing of hindrance. You can still attack, shoot, loot when underwater. I mean, it wouldn't be Sea of Thieves if you couldn't thieve the sea after all. And because the main focus of the game is water, Rare went all out into making sure it looks and feels great. Here's a question, do you ever get seasick? Because in Sea of Thieves it's bound to happen. The waves of the water interact with the ship in such a cool way so that in calm waters it's very steady and peaceful. Harsh waves make it a bit more difficult to maneuver, as well as making it more difficult to fire your cannons properly. And then there's the storm. Don't get me wrong, while the water absolutely looks stunning in that game, it's far from realistic. Let's be real. I mean, if you see the game, it's not meant to be realistic, but immersive. And Sea of Thieves does a damn good job at that. I just hope we get to see more of this in the future. So, with that being said, the next time you look at water in games and think, hey, that's pretty cool, I want you to think how difficult the road was to make that look great. And in the year 2021, we've learnt nothing.